to Future Proof, Geekstart's weekly podcast where we bring together experts from across the tech market to discuss best practices on how to scale your startup. I'm Finbar Dalton, and today I'm joined by Vanessa Buendia. So to get things started, Vanessa, could you provide a brief introduction to yourself and sort of a bird's eye view of your sort of experience today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a marketing expert focusing on, tech companies, SaaS companies, and fintech. I started my career as a reporter for financial services and then quickly evolved into marketing teams, working first with, investment banks and different fintech products, and then, working my way up into other types of tech products. In my last job, I was working for a data tracking company that we were tracking copyright usage for music. And we had, 8 business units, some of them B2B, some of them B2C. So I am accustomed to working with, a lot of talented teams, focusing on product development, go-to-market strategies, content marketing strategies, events, so forth. So I would say I'm pretty strategic, but also hands-on. And I'm a generalist marketer. I've had to jump into different teams. And usually when I come in, I go into teams that are in the startup stage, but are quickly going into hypergrowth. So I would say that I like to build up, new teams and love the challenge of wearing different hats every day.
Sure, no, great stuff. It's quite a unique career path coming from sort of reporting to marketing. What motivated you to make that change to begin with?
Well, I wanted a different challenge. So I kept reporting on and off up to like 4 years ago. So I kept on writing and editing for different publications, particularly British publications. But at the same time, I wanted to do something different and I wanted to try out something different. So there's a lot of skills that are transferable to marketing teams, especially today and age. So a good brand is all about the storytelling. And a reporter knows how to build great stories and how to make them timely and how to be relevant and, how to make sure people can find them. Um, Today and age, content is king, but also we've never had this amount of content before right up to our fingertips. So it is important to have great storytellers and and build up your brand values, your identity, and get your unique selling points all around a great story. So it was really interesting because when I first started my career as a marketer, I jumped into content and communications, right? That's the easiest way to come into marketing teams. And I found out that quickly the skills that I had developed as a reporter, knowing how to write a great article that attracts people and that gets traffic coming were very useful for any marketing team. And from there, I built up other skills for my toolbox that added into that. So I think right now it is important when you want to do that transition to not only be a great writer and build a great story, but also understand different formats, different impact, social media, generative AI, and so forth that can add on to your toolbox.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I know we're going to get onto sort of AI later on in our discussion, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's so much noise now out there when it comes to sort of content and just everywhere on social media and stuff. I guess when it does come to the storytelling piece and really crafting a great sort of narrative around what you're doing and your mission, are there any sort of best practices that you would sort of advise on when it comes to really crafting the right story for your brand or your company?
Well, I would advise people, especially, for startups and scale ups, that, you should not be afraid of being different. On the contrary. So
Mm,
I've come into different startups and scale ups and you talk to management and they go, our competitors are doing this. Why don't you do that? And that's exactly what you don't want to do. You want to learn from them. You want to see what worked for them and what didn't, but you don't want to copy them. You want to be,
mm,
that's why you have your USPs. If you're going to be a copy, then there's no point of you jumping into the market. When you're a startup or a scale up, you have this window of opportunity in which you can try new things and you can be riskier and you can be, more exciting than an established company can't. Okay, they already have a unique brand voice. Their customers know them. They know where to find them, and if you just want to copy and paste what they're doing, you're going to find yourself, fighting against a giant and not being able to carve yourself a space in the marketplace.
Mm.
So when you're doing your own storytelling, I mean, you have to be engaging, but you have to be true to your own voice. You have to be true to your own USPs. You have to be true to your people, to the people that are, buying your own, buying your product and that want your product. So you need to understand the funnel. You need to understand your audiences. You need to understand it's not all about just the demographics. You need to focus on their behaviors. Behavioral marketing is becoming more and more important. There's an example that I heard once that if you actually look at, for example, Mick Jagger and Prince Charles, they come into the same demographic, but their behavior is completely different. So that's why behavioral marketing is really important. So you can find exactly the people that you want. So I think when it comes to building up that story, you really need to understand these factors and, what channels you can find them through, what type of media they're consuming, so that you can build up all these campaigns and all this content that will actually reach them. And don't be afraid to, find your own voice and play around with it and, be a little bit risky. You have that window of opportunity when people don't actually still know who you are, but they start finding who you are, they start finding, different
Mm.
channels. So play around with that and, be true to your brand. I think it's a golden opportunity that, it doesn't matter if you get it completely right or wrong. That's what A/B testing is for. Try it out and try and, be creative. And especially if you're just launching the product or you're just jumping into hyper growth, I mean, you have that chance to be different and to test different strategies. So go for it, and you'll find your own little space.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good point. I think it actually takes quite a lot of courage to be different. I often think that when I sort of speak to founders of tech startups, they can become quite sort of obsessed or too focused on their competition, which then makes them want to become more and more like them, as opposed to really finding their sort of unique space in the market, which really does, I think, work against them in some regards. So I do think though that really to have that great story, you have to have sort of the courage to run with it, and to be different, which takes a lot of guts, in my
Absolutely, but
opinion.
you also need to be strategic. I mean, just because you can
Mm.
do something doesn't mean you should do it. So once you've developed your strategy, you understand who your clients are and where you can find them, and you're building content about why you're doing what you're doing, and you can create that string of campaigns that will lead to conversions. Then you need to be very careful about what tactics you're going to use. So for example, a couple of years ago, everybody was doing podcasts, right? And everybody wanted
Mm.
podcasts. Now podcast is a unique medium in which that it doesn't really produce SEO unless you transcribe the actual podcast. And just because you can do it and they're cheap to do it doesn't mean you need to do it. If you don't have something important to say, if you don't have, the broadcast education to create an engaging, conversation, or you're not an expert in your field, it's not enough with having someone just sitting there and asking questions. Like, for example, right now we're having a friendly conversation. We know that there's some topics that we want to, uh, uh, you know, track or whatever, but we're not sticking to that 100% because it's all about making it an organic and interesting conversation, both for your audience and for what we're discovering. And also podcasts are a great tool. They're a great marketing tool, but you also need to understand it takes time to build up the audience. It takes time to build up that trust.
Mm.
So you need someone that actually knows how to do that. And I would say it's the same thing for every piece of content, for every campaign, for every distribution channel. It's the same thing. You need someone that actually can justify why you're spending those dollars or pounds or euros or whatever, and what are you going to get from it.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I think a lot of it as well comes just down to consistency, doesn't it? It's like there's no
Absolutely.
silver bullet. Like, all channels can work, but I mean, you have to like have the consistency to sort of prove the value, in my opinion. Um,
Absolutely.
I guess, I mean, obviously in your intro, you mentioned that you've worked at, several sort of early stage startups within sort of the fintech and the SaaS space. I mean, from your experience, when do you think startups should really think about bringing on their sort of first senior marketer?
I think senior marketers should come in from the very beginning. One thing that I've seen with a lot of startups, and I would say 90% of startups make this mistake is that they start creating products without really knowing if the market actually wants it. So
Mm,
they've not really done their homework in terms of market research to create a market fit product, right? And it's the stories all this time. You have great technicians, great coders and designers that come in and they all buy into this idea that, oh yeah, we're gonna revolutionize, we're gonna disrupt the industry because this is gonna be amazing and this is what we need. And then they launch it and nobody actually wants it. So this is when I think that, a marketer is super useful. If a marketer can come in, help with market research, see what people actually want in the market, have these discussions, they can provide a lot of insight to the product team or the tech team on how to develop or design the product that will actually have the best impact. Um, that's why I think, a good marketer from the beginning is essential, because also based on that, then you'll start building up your storytelling with ample time to, as well test it out, see if it's going to work, and then build up the go-to-market strategies to, make sure that you have a benchmark, you have goals that are obtainable and that can build up for the company. So I would say, as quick as you can get a good marketer on your team that can bring valuable insight, do it. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes I have seen with founders is that they think marketing is a nice to have as opposed to, a need to have. And that's because there's usually a lack of understanding on what a marketer actually does. So if you're a senior marketer, I think one of the biggest things you should learn how to do is how to speak to management to make sure that they understand the value of what you can do and what it will bring to the table.
sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that point on sort of the market research is really interesting because I think a lot of startups set up, focused on sort of the next hot thing, whether it's a particular area of financial technology instead of really starting from the point of sort of personal pain or a personal challenge that maybe like the founders has encountered within sort of their career, which
Mhm,
obviously means that often you find companies like looking for a problem or a challenge to solve instead of sort of starting with a challenge or problem by design. So
mhm.
obviously, I mean, I'd imagine that by helping on that market research point, you must be able to help companies really not waste a lot of time by going down maybe the wrong sort of rabbit hole, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Um,
And you'd be surprised. There's some products that the market really, really wants, and nobody's actually doing anything to build them. And that's
mm,
because they don't have the proper market research. I mean, it's something like the founder spoken to two, three friends, and they're like, oh yeah, we all want to do this. And that's how, building up the product starts. And it's generally not true. That's why you see a lot of, startups. I don't know how many startups, but 9 out of 10 or something like that fail in their first year. And that's
mm,
usually the reason why.
sure. No, that makes
Mhm.
sense. And I guess for like a startup, then like obviously you shared some examples of mistakes that they make and things to avoid. But when it comes to building sort of a successful marketing function, what do you think that looks like in your opinion, and sort of what would be some of the key maybe success factors or performance indicators you'd be looking for to make sure that things are sort of going in the right direction?
It's always challenging to choose the right KPIs. It depends on your budget. It depends on what stage you are at the company or the product. And it also depends on what the market is expecting of you. So, for example, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago, VCs were investing in companies that were high growth companies, right?
Mm,
Today, they're revenue focused. I mean, they're right now, VCs are only going to, invest in companies that can actually be profitable as quickly as possible. So, KPIs from 2-3 years ago are completely different than KPIs that you need to bring to the table now. What you need to think about when choosing KPIs is you need to think about different factors. For example, right now, it is said that on average, people are exposed to some type of advertising every 6 seconds. So, if you're going to measure, reach, well, yeah, you're going to have a lot of reach, but you actually want to measure the impact. So,
Mm,
and this is just top funnel. If you're just looking for top funnel, you're going to want to think about, probably other KPIs apart from reach, actual impact. You're going to want to talk about engagement. You're going to, I don't know, pay per clicks or something that can really tell you how your campaign, whether it be inbound or outbound, is affecting, the bottom line. But when you're going, when you go further down the line, down the funnel, you're going to have to start thinking about other things. For example, you're going to have to think about sales qualified leads, and how do you find the actual demographics or, the actual potential clients that you want to bring on to specifically to your fintech, right? Let's say we're talking about a fintech.
mm,
You need people that are going to pass KYC because you don't want just people signing up to your fintech product and being completely, I don't want to say useless, but not being the right profile that you're looking for in a client. If they don't pass KYC, you've just spent money on, somebody that's not going to use your product. Now, then once you have people that have passed KYC, you want to avoid churn. So you probably want to measure, how do I reduce churn and how do
mm,
I get them to actually, not just sign up for the product, but start spending on the product or start using the product or whatever that, you're trying to achieve. Now, once that is done, you want to think about customer acquisition costs and how to reduce customer acquisition costs. I remember at a fintech that I worked, we launched a product, and the first month our customer acquisition cost was something like $60. Within 3 months, we had reduced that to like 5 cents, and that's what you want to see. Once you launch it, you have a benchmark, but you want to start you know you want to start working on the benchmark as quickly as possible. And you also want to think about probably customer lifecycle value. So that's another, KPI. And, you want your clients to continuously be using, your product. And you also want to launch new features. So then you need a strong CRM strategy. So as I said, it depends on where your product is, what you're trying to achieve, what the OKRs are at the company, generally. So you want to align with management. You want to make sure that you have great clarity on what needs to be shown, and you need to understand that management is under pressure by the investors to see certain results. So you need to make sure that you're speaking on the right on the right level, and you're using the right words, because it's also a risk that sometimes marketers, they drown in data
mm.
and they
Yeah.
don't know which data is relevant. I mean, you can see it when you're speaking to, every time they ask me this question, what KPIs do you use? Well, what do you want to achieve?
Mm.
Depending on what you want to achieve, I can tell you which KPIs are the right set of KPIs for this. But understand your goals and then understand what really brings impact.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think it's an interesting time, right? Because obviously companies are trying to do sort of more with less. And they're obviously, as you mentioned, on this race to try and get to profitability as quickly as possible. So obviously, I'd imagine that sort of the main goal for most companies is around sort of conversion as opposed to maybe sort of awareness, which might have been a big focus, maybe a couple of years ago when it was just trying to get as many people aware of your product as possible, get many as people as possible into your sort of CRM, and then over time sort of nurture those into, customers. But obviously, like, speed is pretty important now. I guess if a senior marketer was to walk into sort of a new role, tomorrow, with this focus of getting to sort of revenue as quickly as possible, getting to conversion, what are the things that you think would be the most impactful to focus on in their for sort of first 90 days in their new role?
So yeah, I think you're right. I think right now companies are more focused on conversion than on top funnel activities. But the fact of the matter is that if you don't have a great awareness, who are you converting? People won't
Mm.
know you exist. So you also have to make sure that you strike a balance. Now, there's a lot of different ways to achieve this. It doesn't mean that you have to spend an insane amount of money of just an awareness campaigns.
Mm.
You can be much more organic or inbound, but also understand that when you do organic or inbound campaigns, they take longer. So if you want to reduce the time that you're spending, think about partnerships, think about working with
Mm.
other brands that are already targeting your clients, and think about what you can do with them that will add on to their services and add on to your services. And that way you can kind of like piggyback on them. But at the same time, if you're not creating a unique proposal for them, it's not going to work. So you have to understand the market that you're working with. You need to understand who are the key players that can bring value to you, not just by conversions, but also in terms of services. Also, for example, okay, if you don't want to focus on just awareness campaigns because you need to focus on conversions, but let's say you want to focus on have still influencer campaign, okay, well then you need to understand that macro influencers are not going to be the best idea because they don't lead to conversions. It's micro influencers who are speaking to your client base who lead to conversions. So there's a series of tactics that you need to consider when these things are happening, especially in an environment like today in which VCs are focusing on, can you be profitable? And if you can, how long is it going to take?
Mm.
Especially if you're coming into a marketplace where there's already some big players established. There's still many ways to do it, but you need to listen to your sales team. You need to listen to your product team. You need to see what your budget is. Don't be afraid to be creative. It's right now. It's when you start working, in a bootstrap company, you have your, quick wins, but at the same time, be creative. Don't be afraid to play around with it and just,
Mm.
try different things until you get the right formula for you.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you mentioned sort of micro influencers there sort of quickly. I mean, do you think that there's any sort of emerging channels that you see as being particularly effective? Obviously we're seeing more and more content, for example, going on YouTube, and that seems to be like a growing channel when it comes to sort of customer acquisition. Or do you think there are any channels that you think, could potentially be sort of quite effective moving forward in this day and age?
I mean, again, I think it depends a lot on what your product is. I mean, I don't know, for example, in my last position, I had, a team that was super excited about participating on TikTok, but we were a
Mm.
B2B product, So the question was like, why are we going to be on TikTok? There's no point.
Mm.
And I remember some of my more junior colleagues saying, well, because everybody's on TikTok. Yeah, but that's not a reason to jump into a channel just because everybody's doing it.
Mm.
If you actually looked at it, nobody that was selling B2B products was actually on TikTok, but you could create, if you were going to do a B2C product, then it makes a lot more sense. So yeah, I mean, YouTube, for example, is wonderful, but again, it's an overpopulated channel. So if you don't know how to actually build up a campaign that's going to target your users specifically on YouTube, then you're probably going to get lost very, very quickly. So
Mm.
again, you need to understand. I mean, it's great for customer acquisition, and you can probably do a lot of affiliate marketing if you're bootstrapped with, micro influencers that are already focused. I mean, I don't know, if you have a
Mm.
great consumer product, unboxings are always great. But if you're talking about a B2B product that needs, specialized knowledge, you will find someone that does that. You
Mm.
will find someone who already speaks to your clients. So and I agree with you, it's a great tool for customer acquisition. But you have other channels as well. I mean, you have all the channels that Meta provides, and and although Twitter is becoming more challenging by the day, there's still a lot of traction on Twitter. So again, I mean, it's all about the strategy. It's all about understanding your client base. I
Sure.
mean, some people say email marketing is dead, but when it comes to B2B marketing, email marketing still can be highly impactful, and it's a very, financially savvy solution.
Mm.
So where are you going to jump into the conversation? That's the whole point. Like, I mean, I understand once you start, doing your 30, 60, 90-day plan, you need to start thinking about this. This is why, I mean, you part of the question you asked was that, you jump in your first 30 days. What you should do is listen and learn. Sit down, speak to all your colleagues, try to understand, your product, your competitors, what has been done, what has been successful, what hasn't been successful, and why. What are your clients saying? What is the timeline for, the product? What's going on in the next year or so? What do you want to achieve? What are the goals? All the nuances. Then the next 30 days, the second set of 30 days, start building up a strategy and understanding your budget. And, it's tempting when you join a company that you want to say yes to everything because you want people to like you, and you want to be effective, and you want to be quick. I would say, don't do that. Don't do that. Actually pick and choose. It's the 80-20 rule, right? Do the 20% that's really going to impact the other 80, so you have to learn how to say no. But when you say no, you need to learn how to justify that in a way that's friendly and that really proves why you're doing what you're doing. You need to pick and choose your nice to haves from your, need to have, and, get that low hanging fruit, catch that low hanging fruit. And, it might
Makes
not
sense.
move the needle, but it's going to create an impact. So
Mm.
get that low hanging fruit, and then once you start understanding your budget, and, don't forget about the long term. You're there to build up a strategy, and that, if you want to move the needle, it's going to take time. So, you're going to have some quick fixes that are going to have high impact, but don't spend all your day just doing, quick fixes. By the
Mm.
time you reach, the 90 days, what you want is you want to start implementing strategies. You want to get the buy-in from everybody, that all the stakeholders that need to get involved, and you want to start testing. And once you start testing, and once you've built your benchmark, you want to start optimizing. So you start, actually getting results as quickly as possible. That for me has always been a formula that I've used that has been quite effective. And I think it's something that, every marketer should consider once you're joining a new company. Nobody knows everything on the first day. So
Mm.
be humble, listen, learn, and, make sure you get all the help you can get so that you can start building up something that's actually fruitful.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's kind of similar on the business strategy point, don't just do something because everybody else might be looking at it, don't just do TikTok because everybody's talking about TikTok. But I do find it interesting. I mean, I personally, when I'm like researching things, I find myself more and more like researching things on YouTube as opposed to Google now, because I just
Mhm.
find it a lot easier to digest like video content as opposed to having to read through like a lot of information. It's
Oh, me too.
probably
Me too.
not a
I
good
prefer
sign of
watching a
my
video.
probably not a good sign of my attention span. To no, good stuff. Uh,
Audiovisual is always better than reading.
yeah. Um, I guess like coming onto the sort of team building piece, I mean, do you have any sort of tips on sort of how to build a sort of high performing team, and I guess what to look for when you're sort of maybe sort of hiring new talent into your sort of marketing organization? Are there certain like core competencies or non-negotiables that you'd look for when hiring?
Absolutely. When I come into marketing teams that, you're just building up the function, I've seen various scenarios. I've seen, a company that wants to outsource everything. Or I've seen companies that want to, build up a completely in-house team and not outsource anything. And I think both those extremes are a mistake. You
Mm,
need to strike a balance. I understand, especially when you're coming into a startup or a scale up, um, you need to be very careful on who you hire and what you outsource. Because if you outsource everything and you don't have a senior marketer that actually knows how to lead those agencies and those teams, what you're going to be stuck with is a huge bill of things that you don't really understand what the impact is. Now, if you do everything in-house, what you're going to end up is having a team that they don't have enough activities, in the day to, fill their time. So you need to be very smart in how you choose who do you want on your team immediately, and who do you want, how do you want to build it up throughout time. So generally, I think the initial roles that are keenly important to have in-house are obviously a digital marketer. that can manage campaigns, that can, speak to Google, that can help,
Yeah.
with building up the website, everything, all that, and get all the analytics. Then you also want a great content creator that can, speak to the sign, that can understand the storytelling, that can build a brand, that can build campaigns, both inbound and outbound, that can, work directly with, the digital marketer as well, and with product to make sure that, all the branding is correctly implemented. You want a great designer that understands, the brand visuals, that can maintain, that brand presence all around social media and so forth, or, other different channels, merch, whatever you need, and that can really manage expectations, everything from presentation or to investor
Mm.
material or whatever, you want that. And also the digital marketer and the content creator should be able or savvy to manage socials. That's very important. And depending on what your business strategy is, for example, if you're going to have an organic growth, I think having a PR person is super important. I don't think you should leave everything up to an agency. I mean, I think you need someone internally who could really focus the strategy on achieving the goals that you want to achieve. So I think those are the main, the big four to have.
Mm.
And you can build up from there. I think depending on what really needs to get done, you can start, doing a second tier of marketing hires that you're looking for. I mean, and again, I don't think some people want to hire just, junior marketers to save a buck here or there. I say, yeah, okay, you need to get some junior marketers that you want to build into your company. But if you're just getting junior marketers, then you're going to have to spend a lot of time training them. And sometimes you
Mm.
don't have that time, or your time is better spent doing other things. But I think one thing is really important when you're building up your marketing team for the first time is that the people that are in the team, they can wear various hats in the same day, they are hands-on, and they can, because being at a startup or a scale up is kind of like building a plane where you're trying to fly
Mm.
it at the same time. So you have to be strategic, but you have to be hands-on, and you have to be humble, and you have to speak to different stakeholders, and you have to also be excited about, taking on an adventure. It's not going to be like when you're working at a blue chip company where you know your tasks for, months to come, and you know exactly what you're going to do every day, and it becomes repetitive. When you're at a startup or a scale up, there's going to be fires to put out, and there's going to be last minute, requests, and there's going to be things that you have to make up on, halfway there. And but it's a lot of fun, and you get to
Mm.
build something completely new. So that's why I find that exciting.
Yeah, I think that's one mistake that I think every entrepreneur and founder makes, is that they think that they can hire like junior people and get them to perform like senior people. Um, and it just never works out. Like talking
I
from
mean,
definitely talking from experience myself, I think I don't know, I think a lot of people think that, if you just find somebody sort of energetic and enthusiastic enough, they'll sort of figure it out. But oftentimes they don't quite sort of meet your expectations, and then it might have just been much better to hire that person who has, all of the experience necessary. I think it makes a huge
absolutely. I mean,
difference.
I think if I've seen job descriptions out there for marketing director that when you actually read it, you're like, okay, that's not a
Mm.
marketing director, that's a marketing manager. And the pay is according to a marketing manager, which is fine. If you want a marketing manager, that's great. But understand that, you're going to have to sacrifice other things like
Mm.
great strategy or positioning or brand building or something like that. You're going to have to sacrifice it. Just giving someone the title isn't enough. You need someone that
Sure.
actually has experience doing this.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. I think a lot of startups just need to be realistic. Like, if they're hiring their sort of first 50, 100 people, those first 50, 100 people are going to be really different to maybe the 200th employee, right? So I think when they get to that size, maybe that's when a lot of them should think about sort of the training piece and hiring more junior people and developing them, as opposed to maybe that core initial team or that core scale from the outset. if that
Absolutely.
makes
And, and
sense.
and then the other side of the spectrum, I've seen companies that they don't want to hire someone, because they're like, okay, just hiring a marketing team is just too much expense. So let's outsource it. Let's get, a
Mm,
digital marketing agency to take on the campaigns. And it just so happens that the CEO or COO have no marketing experience, and they can't, or they don't have the time to really guide the agency to, get to the results that you want. And they don't understand the KPIs that they're looking at. So you end up with an agency that's overcharging startup teams for very little results. And then
mm,
they just go like, oh, well, this is useless. Why do we need marketing? Let's just focus on sales. And again, you can't sell if nobody knows who you are.
mm.
So I think it's important to have a trusted marketer in your team that knows what they're doing, that can actually explain the analytics and walk you through what needs to be done to achieve your goals.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I guess moving on to sort of the next point, obviously over the past year, we've seen the emergence of a lot of sort of generative AI tools when it comes to marketing, from sort of Jasper AI, for example, on the content creation
Mm.
side, to CapCut on sort of the podcast side. I mean, what do you think the role of sort of generative AI will be on sort of marketing, over the sort of the next year and beyond?
Well, it's really, really interesting because when ChatGPT came out and these, the new software came out, everybody, especially startups, and I saw this a lot of startups and scale ups, people were going like, great, we don't need marketing teams. We can just pay $25 for, the software and we can do all our campaigns. And a lot of people lost their job because of that. And copywriters were freaking out. They were like, I'm not going to have a job ever because of generative AI. And now a year afterwards, we've noticed that this is not necessarily true. And it's right now you can still test, campaigns that are built by generative AI versus campaigns that are built by humans. And you see the campaigns that are built by humans are always outperform generative AI. I think generative AI but however, I mean, I do think it's an amazing tool. What I think is that it won't replace, at least not in the short term, it won't replace people. I think
Mm,
it's a great tool to brainstorm or be more creative, or build mock-ups, or or find things that see things that you haven't even considered. I think that's what you need generative AI. I mean, and there's amazing tools out there. I mean, you have some text to video where you can create a whole new avatar, and I mean, there's a news channel right now that they're doing it with all avatars, and you don't need which is, but I still think it's a lot of experimenting.
mm,
If you look at text to image software, I mean, each generation it's becoming much is creating sharper images that it's almost, I mean, the last images I saw, it almost looked like CGI, but
mm,
it's going to have its good stuff, it's going to have its bad stuff. But if you look at blog building with AI, that is very clear. It's funny, but you can always tell when something has been built by, AI, and when something has been built by a human or written by a human. And especially, for example, if you go to ChatGPT, I mean, the accuracy rate it had a year ago was something like 90%. It's
mm,
now gone down to like 65%, just because of the sheer amount of things that, has been added on to ChatGPT.
mm,
So you still need a professional that really knows the brand, that can use whatever output you get from ChatGPT or whatever other software like Jasper or whatnot, and polish it to create great content. In the end, humans like speaking to humans. That is a fact. And it's still going to be for a long time. But you can start using certain aspects of generative AI, especially for like chatbots,
mm,
and if you want to reduce, your customer service costs. I think AI can be implemented there. It's not exactly generative AI, but you can create scripts that
mm,
will make everybody's life easier. And I think it's great to reduce time spent on certain tasks, especially tasks that are very mechanical. I think it's wonderful. I think it's great for brainstorming, but I don't think it's going to replace marketing teams, at least not in the next year. I think what it will be part of our responsibility as marketers is that in the next 5-10 years, keep on polishing your skill set, learn how to use generative AI, learn what advantages it can bring, test it out, and see what works and what doesn't work. Just keep to date with things. We saw this, 15 years ago when started using social media campaigns, and everybody started getting into digital marketing, and at the same time, it was a lot of fun because we were testing a lot of things that didn't work. And now you see, I mean, if you don't know how to create, performance marketing campaigns or growth marketing campaigns, if you don't have that skill set, you won't get a job. So I think eventually with AI, it's the same thing.
Sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. I think people are just like naturally scared by change, and everybody suddenly automatically thinks about the bad consequences instead of like maybe all of the opportunities and efficiencies it might create. I mean, it would be good if, marketers, still existed, but they could work, 10 hours less a week. I think everybody would agree with that. So,
Or
um,
have a higher output
or
and,
have a
have a
higher
higher output
output.
in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
kind of
reduce
think,
costs as well.
yeah, I kind of think most roles ultimately will become more sort of like project managers, just sort of using all of the different technologies at their disposal, um, to work as effectively as possible, really. I mean, that's the way I see it. Whether you're a lawyer, a marketer, a recruiter, yeah,
Absolutely.
a developer,
But
or you name it.
but it will be more like project management, but as well, you need to know how to input the instructions into the
Mm,
AI to get exactly what you want.
sure,
Otherwise, you
yeah.
come up with some really crazy stuff that you have no idea what it means. So I think polishing those skills is going to be, more and more important, especially when you start, forget about generative AI. When you start building up, analytics campaigns through AI, trying to find, I mean, right now, for example, let's go to a very strict example with copywriting. Just trying to implement SEO
Mm,
generally as a writer is challenging enough because you don't want your copy to be repetitive, to be boring, or to fall
mm,
flat. I mean, as much as SEO is important and you want to get the keywords there and you want to rank on Google, whatever, you need to make sure that it's also something engaging that people want to read. Just having the keywords is not going to be enough. I mean, you're going to get, you're going to get crawlers on your page, but it won't rank unless people actually click on it. Now, to get people to actually click on it and spend time on page, it needs to be good content.
mm,
Now, if you create, AI, you create a blog through generative AI, whichever software you want, just choose,
mm,
it still falls flat.
mm.
So it'll have, whatever keyword you want 1,000 times in it, but you're going to be bored after one or two sentences. So
Yeah.
it's not going to have the intended effect. So that's one example, for example. That's one example.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I guess moving on to the last point, obviously you spent a lot of your career working in sort of the startup environment. What do you think how do you think startups can use marketing to sort of compete maybe against larger competitors that might be more funded than them? What are some of the tactics and sort of the tactics that they can employ to sort of outsmart the bigger incumbents in their space?
Well, we touched about this. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'll say it again. Be creative. So here's the deal. A more established company cannot take as many risks as a smaller company. Okay. Now, if you're coming into the marketplace, you have your USPs and they have to be different than what already exists in the market. If you're going to be a copycat product, I mean, yeah, you might be able to succeed, but it's going to be a lot harder. You want your own USPs.
Mm,
Now, once you identify your own USPs and you know your clients and you know how to reach out to them, you want to make sure that you're different from your competitors. Okay. So I've had this conversation many, many times with senior managers where they go like, look at these blogs they're writing. They're great. Why don't you write the same things? Well, I mean, they're great ideas. And you want to know what went well and what didn't go well. But you want to be clever enough to do it, in your own way and find your own voice. And maybe if they wrote a blog, maybe you want to do a video. Or, or maybe if they, if they did a video, you want to do a podcast. You need to find your own way. You need to reach out to your audience in a different manner because you want to be top of mind. So as I said, you have that window of time where you can try out so much stuff and not have a reputational risk.
Mm,
And you can create all these different benchmarks, and it's not expensive. I mean, doing A/B testing is not expensive. If you're clever enough, if you know how to do it, if you know what you're looking for, that is exactly the time where you want to be as creative as possible. And you're also going to be lean enough to amend and optimize quickly. So nobody's really going to notice it. Okay. And that's the exciting part, really. And that's what's going to, make you shine compared to your competitors. For example, once I worked with a fintech that we were creating financial services products for the migrant community.
mm,
And I mean, your competitors are TransferWise, Remitly, those kind of people, right?
sure. The big
Western
voice.
Union.
Yeah.
I mean, Western Union has been around for 100 years.
Yeah.
And at that particular juncture, we had a very clever CEO who just came up to me one day and he was like, why don't we do a migrant handbook? Nobody's done it. And these people, they don't know how to, they don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they don't even know the language. And it was a very clever and cost-effective idea, because we had a designer in team, we had the copywriters in team, we had the knowledge, and we also had, we spoke to our community every single day, and we knew what they wanted to know. So we started building it, and immediately we saw that our time spent on our blog went from like 30 seconds to 43 minutes, and directly they were going from there to a conversion.
Sure.
And then so using that, we built up a great ebook, and then we distributed it with consulates and other people, and creative partnerships, and it was one of the most successful pieces of marketing that we used. And it was something that TransferWise was never going to do, because they already had their blog and they weren't going to spend their resources on doing this when their traffic was already high enough, or Remitly wasn't going to do it. So we actually took advantage of that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's probably always going to be hard to beat sort of the bigger ones on sort of paid ads and, digital campaigns in that regard. But obviously for more of a content, and you mentioned like distributing it through sort of consulates and things like that, like that's probably something that they were maybe asleep at the wheel at. I started my career in a big bank, and I mean, it would take months to get anything done. So I think a lot of startups forget about that as well. They could try something new every day if they wanted to.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. They always say, as a marketer, especially with fintechs, you're never going to have, your campaign ready and signed off and the budget. There's always going to be something missing.
Yeah.
One of those three is going to be missing.
Good stuff. Awesome. Well, listen, I mean, thanks for all of your insights today, Vanessa. I think that was, really insightful for anybody who's looking to sort of build out a marketing function, or, get insights in how to do it effectively. I guess if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, maybe to learn a bit more about your experience, or to discuss some of these points that we've raised today in a bit more detail, would they be able to reach out to you over LinkedIn, or what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you get in touch with me through LinkedIn, or through my email, vanessa.buendia@gmail.com. I'll spell out Buendia. This is not a very common last name in England. It's Buendia. And yeah, I'm happy to speak to different people and help out where I can. I think it's very important to create a good supporting network in which you can always help people out building up their own brands, and it's always exciting. It's always fun. So yeah, I'm happy to speak to new people.
Great. Well, listen, thanks very much for your time today, and yeah, hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, Finbar. Bye.